Welcome back to the Damage Report. I am Rayyvana filling in for John Iadarola, and we've got a really great show for you today. We're going to be talking about the increasingly hilarious attacks on Representative Matt Gaetz coming from inside his own party. We're going to talk about Trump's self-victimization with his current fraud trial that's happening in New York. We're going to talk about the impacts, the real life impacts of libs of TikTok amplifying conspiratorial messaging around teachers who are part of the LGBTQ community or just support the LGBTQ community. We're also going to talk about how your life might be worse and your life expectancy specifically might be worse if you're living in a Republican-led state. So all that and more coming up on the Damage Report. And joining me to talk about all of that is Aida Rodriguez, who is someone I've been watching on TYT for a long, long time. So I'm really excited to finally get to do a show with you.
Same here. I appreciate that. I'm happy to be here today of all days, because as you said, there are some hilarious things to talk about.
So with that, let's just jump right into this first story because there is chaos in the Republican Party. Everybody take a look.
A lot of people have been calling me about Speaker. All I can say is we'll do whatever is best for the country and for the Republican Party.
Would you take the job? Would you take the job?
We have some great people.
Would you take the job?
A lot of people have asked me about it. I'm focused. You know, we're leading. I don't know you. I'm sure you don't read too much in the papers. But we're leading by like 50 points for president. You know, my focus is totally on that. If I can help them during the process, I would do it. But we have some great people in the Republican Party that could do a great job as Speaker.
The new competition amongst House Republicans for who will be Speaker has kicked off with a bang. A lot of people floating Donald Trump's name. So there you saw him addressing those rumors. And you know what? If being Speaker of the House means that Donald Trump has to drop out of the presidential race, God bless him. Let it happen. If it make him weaker and easier to take out of power, he'd have no direct control of the military, then I'm all for it. Although I don't think that Donald Trump is going to become Speaker of the House. Now let's take a closer look at who might become Speaker of the House, who's thrown their name in the ring, who's vying for that position, and what evil Republican ghoul we might see ascend to that role. So CNN reported that House Majority Leader Steve Scalise and Representative Jim Jordan both jumped into the race Wednesday to become the next House Speaker. The stakes are extremely high as Congress faces down a looming shutdown deadline in mid-November. The House is essentially paralyzed while it lacks a speaker. Now, a lot of people believe that because he is the House Majority Leader, Steve Scalise is going to become Speaker of the House. He's ahead in the betting odds right now, which we'll talk about in a second. But there are some concerns as he's currently fighting cancer that he might not be up for the job, although he says that his doctors are very optimistic about his chances of fighting that. Now, I also mentioned Representative Jim Jordan. And if you're wondering if his involvement in covering up sex abuse while he was working at a university is going to impact his chances on becoming the Speaker of the House, I would venture that they're probably not, because he was allowed to rise to the position of the head of the House Judiciary Committee. So clearly the Republican Party has decided they don't care about that blemish on his background and allowing him to join the leadership in the first place. Now, those two are not the only people vying for the position, and there's still time for other Republicans to jump in the race. Now, one of those Republicans is Representative Kevin Hern, who has publicly considered joining but hasn't officially. Now, Republicans are hoping to have a candidate to hold a full House vote by this next Wednesday, although given the absolute state of disarray that they're currently in, my money is on that not happening. But speaking of money and what I mentioned earlier, let's bring up these betting odds, which, just for the record, who the hell are the people that bet on this kind of stuff? But they have the odds. In first place currently is Steve Scalise, with Kevin Hern coming in second, Jim Jordan after that. You'll see down there, Donald Trump and Hakeem Jeffries currently have the same 5% chance of becoming Speaker, and then as well as Byron Donalds, who you might remember from the first 15 rounds of votes for the Speaker. Now, personally, I'm not a betting woman, but I would put my money on Steve Scalise becoming Speaker of the House. Ida, do you have any predictions on who might become the Speaker, or how long it might take them to finally get this done?
The way that our American government is going, I mean, Homer Simpson could actually be the Speaker of the House in America, because this is a clown show. And it has become, so laughable that it makes me concerned about how we look to the rest of the world and how dangerous that is when they see how vulnerable we are. The fact that Donald Trump probably doesn't know that he can't do both, because he thinks he's one of those guys that thinks he can do everything. He's like the Tyler Perry of government. He's like, I'll direct it, I'll write it, I'll star in it, I'll produce it. Damn it, I'll hold the lights. So, it's very discouraging to see people who have covered up sex scandals, people who lack integrity. I would like to see the Republicans who have maintained faith and integrity and have not allowed themselves to be bought or bullied to step up in these moments. And I don't know who I can name, but can you think of someone? And if you're out there watching, please send me a message, put it in the chat. Who do you think, what Republican candidate, what Republican representative has maintained their integrity throughout these last couple of years that you would say would be a good person to open their mouth and speak on behalf of government? Please let me know, because I'm lost right now.
And you think that there should be at least one person whose name comes to the forefront of your mind. I can't think of a single one. And even if there was one, they'd still have to contend with the fact that there's this, small coalition of Republicans led by Matt Gaetz, who are so beholden to everything Donald Trump wants. I mean, they're like washing his feet, so to speak, and carrying water for him, that they wouldn't even allow someone who's maybe opposed Donald Trump as president to get that role. That person would have to, work with the Democrats, which apparently is a no-go in the Republican Party now. You could be deposed as Speaker for even considering doing that. But I mentioned Matt Gaetz, so let's talk a little bit more about him, because he is someone who I have repeatedly said that throughout all of this will never become Speaker of the House. He has this small group of him and 7 others who opposed Kevin McCarthy, along with all the Democrats, in order to remove him from Speaker. But that doesn't mean that he would become the Speaker himself. I think that there's no path forward for him to do that. And it seems like the Republican Party agrees. So let's take a look at this first video, because the criticism is coming from inside his own house.
The people who were masquerading as fiscal conservatives really aren't, Jake. I mean, Matt Gaetz, to say he came here as a fiscal crusader, it's more likely he came here for the teenage interns on Capitol Hill, to be honest. Look, he's voted for continuing resolutions. He's voted for omnibus bills. He voted for trillions of dollars in COVID spending. Even this year, he put forward an earmark. And yet he's presented himself as, I'm doing this for the fiscal benefit of the country. That's not honest. The guy just had a distaste for Kevin and used the rules to dethrone him.
Wow.
He came here for the teenage interns on Capitol Hill. And that is a criticism coming from his own party. It's funny to see, though, how none of these Republicans had anything to say about Matt Gaetz's sexual impropriety before he opposed the party leadership. It would have been nice if someone would have come forward and tried to raise the alarm on what we know is Matt Gaetz's inappropriate behavior with particularly young women, allegedly as young as 17, but that's a talk for another day. Now,
we call them children, though. Let's call them children. Let's call them what they are, because when the young women, we kind of normalize, but those are children. Those are people who can't vote. Those are people whose parents have to make medical decisions for them. Those are children.
Yeah, and those are people who Matt Gaetz has fought to ensure they're not allowed to make their own medical decisions. But he thinks that it's fine to have sex with people that young and allegedly cross borders of states with people that young with the intent to do that, to have sex with them, which is a crime that he has been investigated for, by the way, allegedly, because he hasn't been formally indicted for such things. But there has been an investigation into that. Now, clearly, because the Republicans are talking about these things, he's burned his bridges in the GOP. So the question is now, is there a path forward for him to get back in their good graces, or is this the start of his Madison Cawthorn arc? And if we're going by what Senator Mullen is saying, it seems like it's the latter. Let's watch.
You got to think about this guy. This is a guy that that the media didn't give a time of day to after he was accused of sleeping with an underage girl. And there's a reason why no one in the conference came and defended him, because we had all seen the videos he was showing on the House floor that all of us had walked away of the girls that he had slept with. He'd brag about how he would crush ED medicine and chase it with an energy drink so he could go all night. This is obviously before he got married. And so when that accusation came out, no one defended him, and then no one on the media would give him a time of the day. All of a sudden, he found fame because he opposed the Speaker of the House back in November, and he's always stayed there. And he was never going to leave until he got this last moment of fame.
Now, so there was an ethics probe back in 2021, and this was one of the things that was brought up at the time. We have this headline from CNN. Gaetz showed nude photos of women he'd slept with to lawmakers, sources tell CNN. So if you have any questions as to how Matt Gaetz views women, it's definitely as objects for him to conquer. And as we mentioned earlier, not just women, also girls. But of course, it's still concerning to see that the party waited until now, until he opposed leadership, to take issue with these things. There you saw Senator Mullen say no one defended him, but you didn't criticize him either. You didn't raise the alarm earlier and allowed this behavior to continue to the detriment of, the interns working on his staff, the women working on his team and on the teams of others that had to work with his office, the girls and women in his district. Now, going back a little bit to this battle with the leadership, the party is definitely turning on him, but apparently public opinion as far as ousting Kevin McCarthy is on his side, because Newsweek reported that according to the 1,913 adults surveyed by YouGov, 46% of American voters agree that McCarthy should have been ousted. Around 28% responded that they either disapproved or strongly disapproved of removing the former speaker. The results did not vary much across political parties. Over half of Democrats, 55%, said they supported or strongly supported removing McCarthy, compared to 45% of Republican respondents. And I do just want to give some context to that, because they didn't ask, do you support Matt Gaetz? Do you support removing Kevin McCarthy for the reasons Matt Gaetz has lied out? So this isn't, that most people support Matt Gaetz by any stretch of the imagination. If I had been polled on this issue, I would have said, yes, I support ousting Kevin McCarthy, because I think it turns the Republican Party into an absolute circus and harms their chances in congressional races in 2024 and helps the Democrats. I think that it's good politically for the Democratic Party. I would have supported it. But if you ask me if I support Matt Gaetz, I would have said hell no in every way I possibly could have. So just to add some context to that, Ida, I don't know. I'm feeling very cynical about these criticisms of him coming out now after the party has protected him for so long, knowing that he engaged in this behavior.
Well, I mean, we know that evidenced by so many things that have happened throughout history is that women have never really mattered to the American government. Only when it's appropriate to weaponize them in these moments where they can use this. Because if a man is walking around, the Senate floor showing pictures of victims, you would think that someone with some decency would report it or would say something about it, not after the fact, because now he did something, he's turning the party on its head. Everybody has envied the AOC and company for so long that they've always tried to create their own version of that within the Republican Party, because they've been so impactful. I can't. I'm very hungry, so I can't think right now. But when you think about the squad, you think about Ilhan and what those significant contributions that Ayanna Pressley, that Corey. I'm sorry, Corey. I can't think right now. In St. Louis, the difference that they've made in our American government has been so powerful, so impactful that they've been trying to create some version of this within the Republican Party. They've gone rogue They have agendas. They're also beholden to corporations and they're getting paychecks. And let's not the American people just be fooled about this to think that this is about principles and this is about caring about the American people. This is just about agendas. And everyone now is fighting as dirty as they can, because no matter how dirty they get, there is a faction of this country that will still support them. And the people that they've been polling about the House, I would love for people to poll them and ask them, what are the 3 branches of government? Because we are sitting here to a bunch of people sitting around talking about politics and American government that are not even receiving a basic education that grants them the information about how our government functions. So this, I'm done with these people. What I challenge is their employers, the American people, to say, what are you going to say at election time when these representatives here are asking you for your vote so that they can keep getting dollars from their bosses, which are the corporate heads? Are you going to still employ these people? Look at our government. Look what is happening right now. Your issues are on the back burner. What's happening in your home today, because I know you hate watch. What's happening in your home today is not an issue right now, because this political theater that is playing out is just for position and power, has nothing to do with your healthcare, your children's education, your safety, being able to go to a public place and feeling secure. None of that is being considered right now. You are on the back burner and you're going to continue to show up for these people. It is embarrassing what the American people have done to their employees. These are our employees. These are your servants. They work for you and they live way better lives than you. And you allow them to do it. So what are you going to do?
Right. And I've brought this up a couple of times over the past few weeks, but when we were headed towards a shutdown, Matt Gaetz specifically said that 10,000 federal workers in his district are going to have to go without pay if the government shuts down. And then went on to say, and that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make on their behalf. To those 10,000 people living in his district, wake up, vote for someone else. This is a guy who's willing to continue to get paid through a shutdown and watch as you're forced to work your essential jobs without pay, to do volunteer work. And that is money you do not get back. That is money that you are just out. You got to, if you're, an essential worker, if you work for the FAA, if you're a TSA worker, you have to, the country can't function without you doing your jobs. The country can function damn well, probably better without Matt Gaetz. If he took some time off from Congress, we'd all be better off for it. But you have these essential jobs and he wants to continue to get paid and force you to work without getting a paycheck. And I just vote for someone else. Also, I really like the point you brought up about the squad, because I remember a few years back, the Republicans really tried to push their new squad that was several Republican women who I never made a name for themselves in the party even, but it was so false and so fraudulent because they failed to understand what it is about the actual squad, about AOC, about Ilhan Omar, about Rashida Tlaib, about Cori Bush that people are invested in. And it's the fact that these are women of color who against all odds have been able to run amazing campaigns, grassroots campaigns, based on unabashed support of progressive policies, not, for random white women from the Republican Party who have never beaten any odds, who don't support women, who didn't get to their positions based on grassroots fundraising, but were based on, corporate dollars. They can't replicate that authenticity that the squad has because there's nothing authentic except for their bigotry about the Republican Party. And so it's so silly.
Yeah, my apologies to the beautiful Black Queen Cori Bush for forgetting her last name because I didn't have any nutrients this morning, knowing all of the impact that she's had and using her voice. But I just think that it's a clown show. Mm-hmm. I remember Malcolm X called it the dog and pony show. We sitting here, we watching this political theater, all of this foolishness, and the American people continue to suffer. So I just say at every turn, American people, what are you going to do? Your employees are out of control. They're unruly. Use your power and get them out of there and replace them with people who give a damn about your well-being.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And especially as we're moving forward into this next election, it's more important than ever for people to get involved because people's lives literally depend on it. We're going to talk about that more coming up in our story about how red states are actively killing their constituents. So we got to go to a break now, though, but stick around because we're also going to give you some updates on Donald Trump's absolute disaster of the trial that's happening in New York. Bad for him, good for us. And we'll talk about that more on the other side. All right, let's talk about a couple of things first. Cenk's book is out now. Justice is coming. I got to make the joke again. It's no longer coming. It's here. You can get that on tyt.com/justice or anywhere where you get books. And Ida, you have a book on pre-sale as well, right?
Yes. My book, Legitimate Kid, it is currently in pre-sales, which is very important. I posted a video on my Instagram page about how supporting authors of color and marginalized groups is social justice. It really helps us in the pre-sales. It creates more opportunities for us, but it also allows bookstores to order our books. So I have signed copies for TYT because the TYT people who support me greatly. They come to my shows. They support me in all ways. So I did sign some copies. So if you purchase your copy from Shop TYT, you will get a signed copy. And it's a book of essays about my journey to comedy. Nothing about stand-up, nothing about my hanging out with celebrities, just about my journey in search of legitimacy. So I hope you check it out. And I hope you find yourself in the book and some healing along with it.
That's awesome. Everybody go get a pre-order. I'm going to do it as soon as the show's over. You should all do it right now while you're watching, while I'm reading some of your comments. And speaking of your comments, let's take a look at them. From the members section, Blue Wildcat says, all the candidates running for speaker are the lowest of the low. Well, I mean, it is the Republican Party. So we weren't going to get anyone great. Hey, we couldn't even get anyone great within the Democratic Party. So God, just depressing state of politics, but we can make it better. We've got that power and we need to utilize that power. Nasty Habits says, hello, everybody hanging out in climate abnormal here in a San Francisco Bay Area heat wave. It was just 85 degrees here in Chicago. Just 85 degrees here in October in Chicago. Most Octobers here, it's already snowing. It was 85 degrees here yesterday. If that's not the signs of the incoming climate apocalypse, I don't know what is. Faro Blue Blazer Dragon said, and who is that protected possible pedophile Matt Gaetz from prosecution? Attorney General Merrick Garland. Don't even get me started. The guy who has had the opportunity to prosecute hate crimes at an unprecedented level, who has just let them fall on the back burner. We're seeing a rise in hate crimes against so many different communities, but particularly the LGBTQ community, particularly LGBTQ people of color, particularly among the Jewish community. We're seeing this massive increase in hate crimes. And what has he done about it? Frick all. So yeah, God, infuriating. Okay, YouTube, corporations ate my baby. He said, how can we not love and support Ida? That's not possible. Haunted Dragon says, I really want to see your stand-up. Saw some on YouTube and was laughing tons. You got a special on Netflix, right?
Yeah, I have I'm on They Ready on Netflix, and I have my own hour special on HBO Max. So please check it out. Some people say I talk too much about social issues to be funny. So that makes me laugh.
And really quick, last one, Mark Hatfield says, Speaker of the House requires real work and decision-making strategies, things not of his interest or abilities.
Man.
I know that you're talking about Donald Trump, but you could be talking about any of those fools. Speaking of Donald Trump, let's talk about this trial. And speaking of foolishness specifically, let's take a look at how Trump's been responding to his trial.
I'm here, stuck here, and I can't campaign. I'd rather be right now in Iowa. I'd rather be in New Hampshire, South Carolina, or Ohio, or a lot of other places, but I'm stuck here because I have a corrupt attorney general that communicates with the DOJ in Washington to keep me nice and busy. And the judge already knows what he's going to do. He's a Democrat judge. In all fairness to him, he has no choice. He has no choice. He's run by the Democrats. I know this city better than anybody knows this city. There's nobody knows it like I do. He's a Democrat judge out of the clubhouses. He's controlled, and it's a shame. What's going on here is a shame. Our whole system is corrupt. This is corrupt. Atlanta is corrupt. And what's coming out of D.C. is corrupt.
That was a very red-faced Donald Trump, livid about how poorly this trial has been going for him. Now, we got to fact check something really quick because he said he was stuck there for the trial. And I have to point out, he has no obligation to be there. He doesn't have to be there until he's called to testify, and that hasn't happened yet. He's just putting on a show so that he can push the framing that they're trying to interfere with the election, that they're trying to prevent him from being on the campaign trail, which is absolutely not what's happening. He was found to have committed fraud, and now they're having a trial to determine damages. He did the crime. It's not election interference. But speaking of the trial, let's go over a little bit of what's happened in the past 3 days. Now, Donald Trump's lawyers got in a fight with the judge overseeing the case, arguing for their right to ask repetitive questions. And really quick, before I get into the details of that, I have to remind everyone, and I must be a broken record. Every time this week I've been on the show, I've brought this up, but this is a bench trial. The judge holds the fate of Donald Trump's ability to practice business in New York and the millions of dollars he's going to be asked to pay back in the palm of his hand. And Trump is like, let me go on TV and call you an idiot. Let me go on Truth Social and insult you and your staff. Let me have my attorneys yell at you in the courtroom. I don't understand the legal strategy here, but with that, let's talk about specifically what they're doing. An insider reported that New York Supreme Court Justice Arthur Engoron, who's presiding over the trial, was having none of it. You're not allowed to waste time, he snapped at Trump's lawyers during one testy exchange. Really quick, I want to add just a bit of information for people who might not realize. Supreme Court Justice sounds, like a very high position in New York. Not that it isn't a coveted position in law. In New York, that's not the highest court. That's the second highest court. The New York State Court of Appeals is what we would think of as the Supreme Court as far as structures go in other states and the way it is federally. But that's not the highest court in the state. Just in case you read that and thought, how did he get it to that level? He didn't. But let me continue on with this reporting from Insider. On Wednesday, Trump's attorney, Jesus M. Suarez, continued his cross-examination of Donald Bender, an outside accountant who had compiled the Trump Organization's statement of financial conditions until 2020. New York Attorney General's office, which is bringing the lawsuit, questioned Bender on Tuesday. Suarez asked about whether Bender and not Trump and his children would be responsible for the statements, which the Attorney General's office said included outrageous valuations that were fraudulently used to obtain bank loans. The move was a continuation of a strategy the Trump Organization's lawyer employed during an earlier criminal trial, trying to shift blame to Bender. The buck stops with you, right? Suarez asked. Bender stressed during multiple questions that he and his accounting firm, Mazars USA, was responsible for compiling the documents, but that the Trump Organization was responsible for giving them the market value and liabilities for each property. So just to sort of summarize what I just read for you, make it more digestible, what he's saying is that Trump provided him the information. He provided him the valuation of the assets. He said, this is worth this much money. This is worth that much money. And this man's job was just to put it together in a portfolio, not to make those valuations himself. But to show you what type of circus Trump's legal team tried to turn this courtroom into, at one point, Suarez, Trump's attorney, pulled up a list of 200 corporate sub-entities of the Trump Organization, many of which were just for particular apartments, and started asking the same set of multiple questions about Bender's work on each one of those 200. He then went through the financial statements of each year of Bender's more than a dozen years of involvement with the Trump organization and started asking the same question about each of them. And that is when Justice Engoron lost it. Here's a quote. "We're not going to go through each year, are we?" Engoron asked. "No, I'm not going to let you do that." Engoron asked Bender whether his answer would be the same for each year. When Bender said yes, Engoron asked Suarez to move on. "What's the difference?" Engoron said. "Jesus, now." Now, Suarez attempted to do this multiple times after Engoron already scolded him for trying it in the first place. So much so that at one point the justice said, "I don't just talk to hear the sound of my own voice. What I'm saying means something." He pounded on the bench and yelled. That is how contentious this battle became between the two of them. Now, at the lunch break of this trial, Trump, despite the fact that he claimed was stuck there, effed off and went back to Florida. And it was at this point that New York Attorney General Letitia James called Trump out for what he's been saying in the media. Let's take a look at that.
Trump's comments were offensive. They were baseless. They were void of any facts and or any evidence. What they were comments that unfortunately fomented violence, comments that I would describe as race baiting, and comments, unfortunately, that appeals to the bottom of our humanity. This case was brought simply because it was a case where individuals have engaged in a pattern and practice of fraud. And I will not sit idly by and allow anyone to subvert the law. And lastly, I will not be bullied. And so Mr. Trump is no longer here. The Donald Trump show is over. This was nothing more than a political stunt.
And through all of this, Ida, it seems like Trump's attorneys are just as childish as he is, and the only arguments and their main argument in court is that this is a political attack on Donald Trump. They've sort of reiterated the racist rhetoric that he has espoused, claimed that the trial was based on race, that she was being an anti-white racist to him. The whole thing is just a disaster show, but he's using it to, promote to his, I think he described them as low intelligence voters. Oh, you're muted.
Do that out of courtesy. What they say is when you're accustomed to privilege, equality feels like oppression. The people in the state of New York are held to the same laws that everybody, that Donald Trump is being held to. And all business owners are held to the same standard. Why he thinks that he shouldn't be held to the standard is just indicative of how elite he is in his mentality. And the people who follow him so closely and worship him don't realize that he does not see himself like them. Because if he did, he would stand trial and say, I'm an American. I want to be a good leader. I want to be a good citizen, and I want to lead by example. And so if I did something incorrectly, then let's go. But he's not doing that because he doesn't feel like he should be beholden to the law, because he does think that he is above everybody else, and he only calls on certain groups of people when he needs them, and he uses them and then discards them. I mean, I don't think that this is in any way a departure from who Donald Trump has been. But this whole idea that he is being persecuted is just his direct call and talk to white supremacists who are out there that are under the belief that people of color are trying to, oppress and apparently get some revenge for what's been done to people of color historically in this country for hundreds and hundreds of years. That, for some reason, these women are like banking everything on that. And it's just straight foolishness that this woman is risking her well-being with the rate of violence and in the world of hate crimes is ridiculously through the roof. That she trying to hold him to the law as she would anybody else is now being called a racist, which is ridiculous to hear people say that. People who, Donald Trump is still running for president. Donald Trump is still leading as president. He still has a great number of people following him blindly. And he is, he's also misinforming the public by saying that he's being held against his will, and it's because he hasn't been able to find something that is outdoing what he did his first run. People are no longer shocked. Fake news is old news now. All of the things that he did that were dynamic at the beginning have been normalized. So foolishness in our American government, it's not foolishness, it's just Thursday. So now as he tries to shock the country continuously with new things to say, new attacks, they're normal now, little hands. That's what you did. You brought all this foolishness about, you shocked the country, you got yourself where you needed to go. You did the next season of The Apprentice within our American government. And now you are shocked that nobody is shocked anymore. But we've already seen you have tantrums. We've seen you turn red. We've seen you make false accusations. We've seen you threaten people. We've seen you give lies upon lies upon lies. Nobody's shocked anymore. You made it normal. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to figure out something else to do because nobody cares anymore.
Right. And, he's still trying to do the same old playbook, going to the rallies, saying, increasingly incendiary things, but it's not getting the media attention. You're right. It's not getting the same media attention it did in 2016 because we've all seen this playbook before. All right. Let's turn to this next story that is shocking, not shocking. You decide, but it's definitely sad for the people who are living in these areas because America as a country has a life expectancy problem. People here are dying far too young in the world's richest country, despite the vast sums of money we spend on healthcare. While Americans are an outlier among industrialized countries, we can see that disparity represented just within the country itself between blue states and red states. So the Washington Post did a study on that disparity specifically, and the results are very clear. And you probably have an idea of which party kills their constituents more through their actions. So the study examined 3 neighboring counties in 3 states. We have a chart showing them. There's one blue leaning in New York, a swing state in Pennsylvania, and a red leaning county, in Ohio. And then there is the map. Now, WAPO chose these 3 counties because they're in 3 different political environments statewide, while still being tied together through geography and their local economies, which have all struggled in the face of declining industrial jobs over the past decade. So let's talk a little bit about the findings of this study. Ashtabula residents, and Ashtabula is the red county in Ohio, residents are much more likely to die young, especially from smoking, diabetes-related complications, or motor vehicle accidents than people living in its sister counties in Pennsylvania and New York. And they compiled these graphs, which we can pull up, to show the death rate trends compared to the party controlling state government. And you can see the disparities there between New York, Pennsylvania, and Ohio. Now, you might be wondering, how did this pattern play out during the pandemic? It held true during the heart of the pandemic. We're not out of it, of course, it's still ongoing, but during the beginning and the heart of it, before we had a vaccine, that pattern still held true when Ashtabula residents died of COVID at a far higher rate than people living in the counties in New York and in Pennsylvania. And that should make sense to you because of the GOP's history spreading misinformation about COVID, as well as vaccine hesitancy, and championing the idea that masks are tyrannical and that encouraging people to do isolation so as to stop the spread of COVID is an infringement on your individual liberties. Not letting someone's grandma die is the biggest affront to individual liberties that the Republican Party could imagine, I suppose. Now, if you're wondering where this disparity traces back to, like so many horrible things in this country, it traces back to Ronald Reagan. from the Washington Post study, state lawmakers gained autonomy over how to spend federal safety net dollars following Republican President Ronald Reagan's push to empower the states in the 1980s. Those investments began to diverge sharply along red and blue lines, with conservative lawmakers often balking at public health initiatives they said cost too much or overstepped. And if we pull that graph up back for 1 second, you can see that they all start around the same place in 1980. In fact, the study noted that life expectancies in Ohio in 1980 were roughly the same as California in 1980. And now California has the second highest life expectancy rate among all the states, only behind Minnesota. And Ohio is in the bottom fifth of all states. And it's just quickly to clarify for anyone who's wondering, how does death from cigarette-related diseases, motor vehicle accidents, and diabetes relate back to parties? It's because the Republican-controlled areas didn't want to implement public health measures that save lives, that prevent. That's cigarette taxes, that's taxes on sugary drinks, that's passing initiatives on keeping the roadways safe, lowering speed limits, implementing seatbelt laws. They were reticent to do that. In fact, they fought off doing those things, and it lowered the life expectancy of the people who live there because of it. And Ida, when I was going through this data this morning, I expected the result of it to look something like this, but I was just shocked at how clearly you can see this disparity in life expectancy amongst these three counties that all have such similar economic and geographical conditions, but such a different quality of life for the people who live there.
Yeah, it's interesting. As I was reading about homelessness, and one of the things that they always correlate is homelessness with drug use, and they always attribute that to the coastal states. They, New York and California, they're liberal, but the numbers are staggering in red states. And the quality of life, which is what people in every state should measure, is their quality of life versus the quality of life of the people who represent them. Mm-hmm. And it doesn't matter if you're a firefighter, if you're a teacher, if you work at the cafeteria, in a school, your quality of life should be the best that it could possibly be right where you are. And it should be just as good as those people who wake up every morning to allegedly represent you. But when you hear this, Ohio, which has an astronomical rate of missing women, 35 Black teens gone missing in Cleveland. Nobody knows where they are. We don't speak their names. It is not a national issue. When we think about cigarettes and we think about these toxins and sugary drinks, you know how much money they make from these corporations and these checks that they get slid to them off to the side on the cut. I'm so tired of hearing people talk about my people and where I come from in the inner city as being thugs and gangsters. The biggest thugs and gangsters are over there in DC making these decisions, holding up the government, being foolish, disrespecting the law, disrespecting the American citizens. We have a problem. We have a serious problem in our government. They are killing Americans. They've been doing it for a long time. Ronald Reagan sprinkling crack in our communities and then blaming us for it. It is unbelievable where we are now. And the fact that the American people are too busy trying to struggle to survive, they don't have the information because they're not getting the education. They are the greatest victims of all of this stuff that is happening. And again, I say to you, American people, get your employees because they are out of control.
And just quickly to add on to that, here in Chicago, the Republicans held a little conference about crime in Chicago, which is down incidentally, which if you actually want to examine crime in Chicago, do it along economic lines. Look at the history of redlining in the city, the massive segregation that we still have in Chicago today. People here always talk about two Chicagos. That still very much exists, the lack of economic opportunity on our south and west sides. But why didn't these Republicans take some time to investigate, instead of crime in Chicago, why don't you do some investigation into the sex crimes of your own party members? Why don't you hold some investigations about that? Okay, we absolutely have to go to a break, but stick around because we'll be right back. And we're going to talk about, speaking of Republican crimes, we're going to talk about one Rudy Giuliani.
Ooh, hot mess.
Oh, I'm so excited for the Rudy story. That man is so absurd. Also someone who's got some sex crimes on his record specifically. God, these just the crimes these men are allowed to get away with towards women, towards girls, that are covered up, that are protected because they are elected officials, is sickening. It's disgusting.
They've always been able to do it.
Okay. All right. Let's take a look at what you guys are saying. Banana says, just waiting for Mevin Kamarthi to run for speaker. Just Kevin McCarthy in a wig, fake mustache, in a bad accent. I watched his whole little speech he did. It was so funny. When he said he wasn't running again, he was up there like, I had to walk uphill both ways to school in the snow in Bakersfield, California. There was self-victimization. He was like, I started my own business. Did he mention that it was in his uncle's yogurt shop? No, he did not. All right, Donald Trump's 116 indictment says, missing Dragon Daddy, love you ladies, you're doing an awesome job, happy indictment season. How many more indictments do you think are coming? As many as there are stars in the sky. If there's justice in this world, he'll be indicted for all of his crimes that he's committed throughout his career, and particularly needs to be held accountable for the race discrimination he's been involved in through his businesses. I mean, I'm glad that he's being held account to the fraud. And let me skip ahead though. Let me go down to Twitch because I haven't looked at any Twitch comments yet. Michael R. Hassler says, I'm reading it. It's actually good, with a thumbs up. Late Bloomer says, pre-ordered Ida's book. Cannot wait.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Let me look. Sea Prince Dragon says, 15 months, many more as a member. Hi, ladies. It's moved away from me. I honestly can't believe how sad the state of our government is these days. It's upsetting.
Yeah.
Definitely upsetting. Honestly, having the news be my job, it's a little bit, I've got to have a lot of moments in my day where I just turn away from it and do something else entirely, because it is grating. It brings you down.
Yeah. You remember when they would reference Idiocracy as like the point where Mike Judge and Ethan Cohen wrote such a masterful piece, and everybody was like, oh, we're an idiocracy, and it was a joke. And that was when Donald Trump first ran, and people were like, wow, that's funny. It's not funny anymore.
No,
it's really sad. It wasn't funny then, but it's not funny anymore. People are suffering in this country.
Yeah, not funny is definitely it was like, that's apt before, but now it's just like, all right, we're too spot on. We gotta we gotta fix something here. The world is broken.
Facts.
Shiny says, barf, I didn't need to have the idea of him going all night planted in my head. Tech Nauseated says, 28 months. Oh, they subscribed for 28 months. It said 28 months. Nito burrito. Now you've got me really hungry. Anthony McClendon says, Trump says he would rather be in New Hampshire. I live in New Hampshire. Please keep that orange stain in New York. And then this says, 5,295 reports of missing American Indian and Native women.
Yes, absolutely yes. So sometimes we miss some names and charge it to my head and not my heart, but the reality of it is that we have a missing people of color problem in the state of Ohio. I mean, we have one globally, but so thank you for mentioning that, because it is important that we speak what matters to the people. That's what matters to us. They don't care. Please vote accordingly.
Especially right now, as there was so much coverage about the little girl who was kidnapped in New York. And I think that's important, but why don't little girls of color, women of color get that same sort of coverage when they go missing It's racism. It's plain and simple. Everyone should get that same sort of attention that that little girl got that got her home safely. How many lives could have been saved if we prioritize the lives of girls and women of color the same way we do of white people in the media? We gotta be serious. We gotta wake up about that. We gotta call it what it is. It's racism.
Yeah.
Speaking of racists, let's talk about Rudy Giuliani, who is his new approach to getting money. He's getting desperate. He's got these indictments. He's getting desperate. His new approach is suing Joe Biden. Take a look.
Being called a Russian pawn and being called by the leading candidate of the Democratic Party a facilitator of Russian disinformation is an extraordinarily damaging thing. It may be that a lot of people don't believe him, but a lot of people do believe him. Go look at the public opinion polls. So those people believed that I was working with Putin. That is 100%, 1,000% untrue. Not only that, it's been proven untrue.
Tell me you're desperate for money without telling me you're desperate for money. So Rudy Giuliani is now suing Joe Biden, accusing him of defaming him 3 years ago. It's this new lawsuit filed by Giuliani's lawyers. They're contending that Biden defamed Giuliani twice during a televised presidential debate with Donald Trump in 2020. So let's talk about what they're alleging. The lawsuit alleges that at 2 points during the debate, Biden falsely accused Giuliani of being a, quote, Russian pawn and dismissed Giuliani's criticism of his son Hunter's laptop, claiming that the ex-mayor believed a bunch of garbage. Now, during the debate, Biden said Russia was feeding Giuliani false information to help Trump's chances of getting elected president, something that had been reported, something that Trump himself had been warned about at the time, but just to read the quotes, specifically what Joe Biden said was, they're interfering with American sovereignty. That's what's going on right now. They're interfering with American sovereignty. To the best of my knowledge, I don't think the president said anything to Russian President Vladimir Putin about it. He continued on. His own national security advisor told him what is happening with his buddy. Well, I shouldn't. Well, I will. His buddy, Rudy Giuliani, is being used as a Russian pawn. He's being fed information that is Russian, that is not true. And then what happens? Nothing happens. And then you find out that everything is going on here about Russia is wanting to make sure that I do not get elected the next president. So a little bit more about this lawsuit. What they're alleging says defendant Biden knew that the preceding statement about the laptop and asserting that the plaintiff lied about the content of the laptop were untrue, while also charging that now Secretary of State Antony Blinken had sought to discredit Giuliani regarding Hunter Biden's laptop. Now, in the lawsuit, it goes into the perceived damages Rudy has suffered for the statement made 3 years ago. But here, let's have Rudy tell it to you himself.
His lies cost me a good deal of my law practice. It cost me directly a good deal of my million-person audience on Common Sense, where I was cut off by YouTube, which operates as a co-conspirator in another conspiracy of Biden's, which is to suppress free speech. It cost me clients in my consulting business. I haven't calculated the amounts. We can do that later, but it's in the millions and millions of dollars.
Oh, this man is so desperate for money. And it's so reflective of the Trump defense. Nothing that has the consequences that I'm having to stare in the face right now, none of that could possibly be because of the things I did. It's got to be someone else's problem. And this time that someone is Joe Biden. I mean, it's ridiculous. We all know it's ridiculous, but to see how far this man has fallen, it would be sad if he wasn't such a piece of garbage.
Yeah, it's called when the chickens come home to roost. I'm on my Malcolm X today. All of that stop and frisk, all of the terror on Black and brown men in the state of New York, all of the racist, policies that were in place as a result of this man. This is karma. And the thing is that what's caused him all these dollars is his loss of credibility and respect on the trail and the heels of Donald Trump, the hair dye, the flatulence video, like all of that stuff. There's no respect anymore. No church in the wild, according to, as Ye would say. It is unbelievably ridiculous how far he's fallen as a result of being negotiable and not having any decency. And now here you are begging people for money, looking like a fool. You think you've lost your business and your dollars because of being called the Russian pawn? You were called the Russian pawn by many for a very long time. You lost your credibility because you were running around looking like a fool behind Donald Trump because you were chasing them dollars. And now you out here, as the kids would say, out here trying to, with this ridiculous lawsuit. This is not even in defense of Joe Biden, because I don't care about either one of these political parties. I care about the American people and the policies. This is just straight foolishness. And the fact that he gets airtime is what burns me the most, because that is the airtime that could be used for things that are very important. As we talked about, these people who have been missing, who are missing, that we don't know where they are. They talking to Rudy Giuliani about his little foolish lawsuit because somebody called him a name, and there are real things happening in America that should be getting coverage that don't, because the news has turned into reality shows.
Yeah, and it definitely helped inspired when some American people allowed in our political system that is inherently undemocratic, allowed a literal game show host to become the president. And as you said, there's no church in the wild. There's also no honor amongst thieves, because why does Rudy have to do this? Because he gave his entire life to Donald Trump, and is Donald Trump got his back now? No, he doesn't. Is he helping to pay for his defense in these lawsuits and these indictments? No, he isn't. He held one candlelight dinner for donors to raise money for Rudy Giuliani that was not advertised at all and did not make him very much money. But speaking of Rudy Giuliani, the other thing that he needed people to know was that he denies the allegations that he has a drinking problem. He said Giuliani's drinking, long a fraught subject, has Trump prosecutors' attention. So let's hear what he says first and then go into the allegations. Now, notice how his attorney on the left is desperate to end the press conference.
It's a typical New York Times malicious lie. I do not have an alcohol problem. I have never had an alcohol problem. And the reason I told you what I achieved is nobody could have achieved that if they did. When the hell was I drinking? I was working 24 hours a day. It's a big damn lie by a newspaper that's a disgrace, and by a reporter who covered me, used to cover me very, very, in a very glowing way, and now is vicious and mean in what she does.
Thank you.
And it's my press conference. Vicious and mean. And if it weren't for the protections that the press gets with Times Against Sullivan, I mean, she should be sued for libel. She should also be thrown out of the profession for being a damn liar. But that's okay.
He was working for 24 hours a day. When did he have time to drink? Apparently, according to all accounts, during those 24 hours of the day. I mean, we don't have to get into the specific allegations because Rudy Giuliani's alcoholism is a long documented thing throughout so much of his time as a prosecutor, as mayor, as Trump's attorney. And it is just so funny to see him squealing like this when he knows that he's getting all this negative press. But unfortunately, that's all the time we have for those of you watching on linear, but stick around because we'll be back with the aftermath right after this. So hold on to your butts. Rayyvana and Aida Rodriguez back for you on the damage report. In the aftermath, you can release your butts now. We're back. We were getting fired up a little bit in that break. So we're just going to continue that energy as we just jump right into this next story that has me PO'd so much. This one, the one after that, we're going to be angry for a while because a gay principal in Wisconsin has filed a discrimination complaint with the state. And the evidence that the school board discriminated against him on the basis of his sexuality is absolutely damning. Let's get into some of the facts of this from LGBTQ Nation and their excellent reporting on this. That they wrote, as Wisconsin Public Radio reports, the Raymond School Board voted 4-1 during a closed session on September 27th to consider non-renewal of Raymond School Principal Jeff Peterson's contract, which is up in 2025. The following day, Peterson was escorted from the school by Superintendent Mike Garvey and 2 sheriff's deputies. In a hand-delivered letter, Peterson was informed that he was being put on non-disciplinary paid administrative leave while the district investigates allegations that he, quote, engaged in misconduct. The letter did not specify what type of misconduct Peterson was accused of or by whom. They brought sheriff's deputies in there to criminalize this man for being gay. They escorted him out like he was going to cause a scene because he was gay. They made false allegations of impropriety against him because he was gay. And he says that since he was hired to be the principal of Raymond Elementary School, he has been the victim of homophobic attacks. Peterson was hired as principal of the K-8 elementary school in July 2021. In his complaint, he alleges that during his first board meeting as principal, members of the public directed anti-gay comments towards him, while board members took no action to curtail the comments. And even worse, the district revoked the health care that Peterson's partner was receiving because they were a gay couple, and they did it with malice. Peterson also alleges that in August 2021, the district canceled his partner's health insurance coverage without notice. After he inquired about the cancellations, Peterson claims he was told that, quote, same-sex partners cannot be included on family policies for any reason. That is policy and law. And if you're wondering if it's legal, it is legal in states to discriminate against gay couples in a place where they would not be allowed to if that was a straight couple. So the idea that we have achieved all of our equal rights as the queer community is not true. The fight continues because discrimination is still legal in so many cases in so many places across the country. Now, of course, this district was also engaged in what so many Republicans have been doing, book banning. They even banned an episode of the kids show Arthur because it featured a same-sex wedding, a children's show. They banned it. They said it was inappropriate sexual material. And I don't know what it is about these conservatives that they look at us gay people and immediately think of gay sex. I'd say that is more of a, it says more about them than it says about us and their, inappropriate thoughts and their sexualization of us that says anything about our community. But we need to talk about this next thing that they did, because the board president, Audrey Kostich, this might be potentially the most heinous thing that happened, because she was in her pursuit of bigotry, in her pursuit of homophobia against Peterson. She was willing to victimize elementary school girls, willing to throw them under the bus in order to accomplish her homophobia. Peterson claims that in June 2023, Kostich insisted that he consider whether middle school girls were menstruating when doling out punishments for bad behavior, and instructed him to ask female students whether it was their time of the month. The complaint characterizes that request as a trap intended to sabotage Peterson by forcing him to bring up topics with students that can be considered sexualization. And these people who pretend that they're trying to protect the children are actually the ones sexualizing the children, putting the children at risk. She had no issue causing harm, causing trauma on these girls if it accomplished her goal of homophobia. Now, Peterson, of course, didn't actually ask that question. He didn't follow through with that directive from her because he knew how it would harm those students. He knew how inappropriate it was to ask that question. But that's how far she was willing to go to harm this man. And if you couldn't have already gathered how bad the bigotry was, how obvious this homophobia was, the board made it clear as day. Peterson's complaint also alleges that the board installed Garvey as superintendent to enforce its political agenda. Peterson claims that in March 2023, Garvey demanded that another adult be present when Peterson taught human growth and development to 5th grade boys to ensure that he didn't indoctrinate his students. And it's stories like this that get me so angry when I think about members of my community who are mouthpieces for conservative politics. Those people who are getting a bag to sell out the community in service of these people who hate us, that want to discriminate against us, want to get rid of us from society. How can you look yourself in the mirror? How can you sleep at night knowing that you're shilling for people who hate you? It makes me sick.
Yeah, it does. It's sickening. It's sad. And so, I was raised by a queer man who was murdered in a hate crime in 2013, October 16th, the day before my book comes out, my uncle's 10-year anniversary, being beaten to death in Miami, Florida, for being a queer man who was continuously stomped and kicked on the head. And I speak to it because the murderers have never been brought to justice. And I will speak about this until that happens. But when the interesting thing about this party and the people who are supporting these talking points and the people who support their stuff, they have such a high rate of predators amongst them. Mm-hmm. People who are, the ones that are in the bathroom with the girls that we saw a couple of weeks ago, that was not a queer person. It wasn't a trans person. It was nobody that belonged to the LGBTQ community. When you think about these people who are trying to pray the gay away because they're battling with their demons and they are, projecting all of this hatred that they feel for themselves onto queer people who are out in the world just trying to live their lives. It is egregious. And I am just, in awe of the fact that in this day and age, we're still fighting these fights. And, it's unfortunate for the children because the children who need this village to show up for them and need people who care about them and want to nurture them, be straight, gay, queer alike, they need this. And you are spending your time policing someone's personal life because it makes you feel a certain way. We have gotten out of control. These witch hunts that people are conducting in this modern day and age is just out of control. And we don't mind our business. We don't ever question the proclivities of heterosexual people who show up every day and are around our children. We don't know who's a swinger. We don't know who's into S&M. We don't know who's into whatever they're into because it's none of our business. As long as they don't, bring that into the classroom with the children, we're fine with it. But because they're heterosexual, their sexuality and their behaviors are never at question. It is only with the queer community that there is this weird preoccupation with, and it ain't biblical. It ain't, because God told you to mind your business and let God do God's work. And you just go on and be the best person you can be, and shine the light so bright that people want to follow your path. That's all you're supposed to do, and treat your brothers and sisters good. That's the New Testament Cliff Notes. 2 things: you believe in God, and then you treat your brothers and sisters and your non-binary siblings well. That's all you're supposed to do. But you think that playing God is really what you're supposed to be doing when, according to your word, you will be held accountable for that. It's just tiring. It is let people live. Mind your own business. Why aren't you worried about what the other teachers are doing when they're not at school? And I'm sure you'll find a laundry list of things that you may find to be freaky, creepy, that you don't agree with, but you don't care because they're straight, right? It's bigotry. Mm-hmm. And for the people who bite their noses to spite their faces, a lot of these people who are queer that I've met, like at Politicon, they're racist. So their own humanity is not a deal breaker because they hate people of color so much that they will side with Trump. They will side with these ideologies of people. It's just really sad. It's really sad.
Yeah, it is so pathetic to have the lived experience of having to suffer through bigotry and then say, you know what? Other people should have to take that. I want to do that to other people instead of empathizing and saying, this is a horrible experience that I've gone through. No one should have to be treated like this. This is inhumane. They're treating people like they're less than human. That's wrong. But instead, it's like, well, if I'm nice to these, fascists, then maybe they'll be nice to me. And then as long as I'm mean to other people, as long as I'm hateful towards other people and bigoted towards other people, it's pathetic and shameful, and it's so low. It's so low to go through that experience and then want to enforce that experience on others. And speaking of wanting to enforce bigotry on others, we need to talk about libs of TikTok. Because the war on woke movement, so to speak, has taken the word war way too seriously. And one account on Twitter is leading these troops. At least 11 schools or school districts that were targeted by the account libs of TikTok over anti-LGBTQ grooming conspiracies last month received bomb threats just days later. And if you don't know, God bless you, Libs of TikTok is an account that is helmed by Chaya Raichik and has positioned herself as a vigilante crusader against wokeness, whatever the hell that is, in schools as well as in culture. Now, bomb threats are not a new thing for Libs of TikTok extremists, because last summer, hospitals were besieged by bomb threats, children's hospitals, after Libs of TikTok and similar accounts obsessively highlighted the fact that they offer gender-affirming care to transgender youth. Gender-affirming care, which is best practices for doctors to prescribe to queer youth. But they don't care about that. Now, here are some of the posts that led to these threats. Thank you to the producers for pulling these up, because she has had me blocked on Twitter for years now, so I can't see them with my own account. But she posted this on September 21st. She tags a school district and says, blocked the Libs of TikTok domain when we reached out about pornographic books they're offering students. We tried 20 different email addresses. They offer genderqueer in elementary school. What else are they trying to hide? Full story here, genderqueer is not pornography, by the way. But on September 22nd, Cherry Creek School District, that school district that she tagged, received bomb threats against several schools and administrative buildings. I just need to remind everybody, these people argue that they're protecting children. Their holy war, their crusade is in a service to protect the children. And in order to protect those kids, they're threatening to set bombs off at schools filled with children. That is how they believe they're protecting children from knowing that gay people exist. It is patently absurd, but that's not the only instance of that, because she posted this on September 13th. Says, this is scary. Teacher in the school reveals the school is actively hiding students' gender transition from parents. The school also claims that staff are pressured to go along with the students' gender confusion. Again, she's not a doctor. She's not a well-educated individual who has an expertise on this topic. She's a hateful bigot who's grown in prominence because of, not in spite of, her ignorance within the conservative homophobic movement. Now, that school district received a bomb threat by email 2 days later. This was the second direct threat that district, which is the largest in Minnesota, received in the last 2 years. And threats against schools in 2022 were up 60%, Libs of TikTok effect, compared to the previous year, according to the FBI. In addition to bomb threats, many who are blasted on Libs of TikTok experience vicious harassment, doxing, and intimidation. Let's talk about one. Erica, a school bus driver in the Pittsburgh area, told Vice News that her life was turned upside down when a screenshot from her private Facebook account made its way to Libs of TikTok. The post showed a sheet of stickers she'd ordered, which included pride flags and innocuous slogans like, all humans are beautiful. Of course, Libs of TikTok had to frame that as something disgusting and heinous. She tweeted this: meet Erica, a school bus driver. She's covering her school bus, which she uses to transport young children, with trans propaganda. Why would a school bus have signs promoting the sexualization of children? No one is sexualizing kids but you. If you hear that a kid is trans and that immediately makes you think of sex, that reflects poorly on you. That reflects on your dirty mind, your proclivity to sexualize children. if you see a gay couple holding hands and immediately think of sex, again, that's because of your dirty mind. That's not because they're promoting sex to children. You're disgusting. You are a disgusting person for a wide variety of reasons, this just being one of them. But back to Erica, within 24 hours of that post going up, she was swarmed by online harassment. And her supervisor gave her a heads up that the superintendent of the school district had been fielding tons of complaints and had been asked by board members to search her bus and take photos. So a little on that. There's sunflowers and butterflies on my bus. I have a few magnets that say, be kind. I was never reprimanded. They said they're behind me. They did ask that I do not put any rainbow or allied supportive magnets on display on my bus. And she's trying to kill queer kids. That is the end effect of this, is when they feel not supported, they have a higher rate of suicide. Queer children have higher rates of suicide. Just having one adult in their life, one close friend, one family member, one teacher who supports them can make all the difference between them choosing to live their authentic life or them taking their own lives. And to do this under the guise of protecting children is sick and disgusting. And if this was a just world, she would be behind bars. She would be locked up for all of the pain and the suffering and the tangible crimes that she has inspired.
Yeah,
I'm angry.
It was in 2007 when I had a blog, and I did a blog entry about 11 children who had taken their own lives, who were all 11 years old or younger. And I think that 9 of these children were being bullied for being queer kids, or people having the suspicion of them being other children. And I think that, this continuous preoccupation with queer people and causing pain and continuously perpetuating the hatred towards them ends up hurting the children most of all. And that is why we don't respect these people who say they love children and are pro-life and anti-choice, but don't give a damn about them after they're born. That they say they're fighting for the children because they don't want them to be indoctrinated, but will put out information that's false that could potentially cause harm to the children who are not queer in the hospital, in the schools. They don't care about the children. They don't care about anybody. This is, first of all, we're dealing with mental health issues. Like those people that spend that much time, that's obsessive behavior. It is obsessive, and it is, you're talking about people who don't have a lot of free time on their hands. And if they do, this is where they choose to put their energy. No one who is healthy, who has has any semblance of whole mental health, is out there weaponizing and mistreating and abusing queer people. They just don't, that something is wrong with you. There's something wrong with you. You're battling with your own demons. This is some form of self-hate, or you have some sort of mental illness, because this is not justified in the Bible. It is not justified in the Quran. It is not justified in the Torah. It is not justified in any of this doctrine that you speak of. This is all created by these people who are hateful and mentally ill. And I'm going to continue to call them that, because if we continue to call them normal, we normalize this behavior. Something is wrong with you when you wake up in the morning and all you think about is queer people. Mm-hmm. It's wrong. Something wrong with you.
That's an excellent point, because I always say I'm gay and these people think about gay sex more than I do. Yeah. Like it's an obsession. It's especially when they're calling gay people, they're accusing us of sexualizing children, but you have people like Matt Walsh out there talking about the healthy breasts of teenage girls, language he literally used. That's not sexualizing children. Why the hell are you thinking about young girls' chests, Matt? That's disgusting. Maybe you should be investigated. Maybe someone needs to take a look, peer into your hard drive, or it literally is. It's just they hear gay and then they think sex, and they sexualize children. They sexualize straight children. They're always asking little girls, "Oh, do you have a boyfriend?" It's like, let her be a little girl. Let her be a child. Let these kids be kids. Stop enforcing your heteronormative sexual ideologies on these kids. Let them live their lives. Some of them are going to be gay. And that's fine. We need to love and support those kids, because the alternative, what happens is so many people I've had close to me, I've seen this deterioration that happens when you don't feel supported, when you have all this hate directed at you. I don't want to see anyone go through that. Child, adult, doesn't matter. No one should have to live their life like that.
I would be interested in seeing a poll of like research of the number of people who've been sexually abused by people who are straight versus queer. And I can almost guarantee you that the numbers are ridiculously. I mean, I was sexually abused never by anyone who was queer. None, people that I know. I just think it's very interesting that we have attached that. And the other thing is the dehumanization of you. When all I could do is minimize you and your partner to sex, and not the fact that you live your whole life all day long being just a regular human being doing human being things. And all I can think about is the fact that you're having sex with a person of your same gender is just very problematic. It's dehumanization. And that's something that bigots are really good at. They dehumanize queer people. They dehumanize Black people, immigrants, everybody who belongs, First Nations people. It is just unbelievable how they specialize in dehumanization. And so, I always like to always put out a good word. If you're out there, you're battling with your sexuality and you're having some identity issues and you don't feel supported, DM me. I will direct you to someone who could possibly talk to you. But your life matters, and don't let the chatter of these miserable, mentally ill people affect you. If you are watching and you need support and assistance, please reach out to somebody, because you really do matter. And those shouts they don't matter. Those people don't matter.
And I think that's a perfect way to end today's show. Thank you so much for joining me today. Everybody, pre-order the book. Check out the specials. It's Netflix and HBO Max, right?
Yeah. Thank you so much for being such a generous host. John, I love you and I miss you, and I can't wait to kiss that baby. And thank you, TYT, for always supporting me. I'm so blessed, to be a part of this family.
Well, thanks so much for being here today. Thank you to everyone in the audience for tuning in. That's all the time we have for the Damage Report, but stick around because Indisputable is coming up right after this break.